So last time we finished up chapter 7. Arthur has received his punishment for what he has done. He is going to start working for the junk man. The last chapter we were on, Arthur was in his bed and he was talking to his sister. And what was his sister worrying about? Yeah, like she's really worried that Arthur is going to die because their dad did. Yeah, so she's worried about that. She's very young, so she doesn't quite know what's going on. But we also found out how his dad died. Do you remember how?
Yeah, got drunk on a motorcycle.
Yeah, so a drunken motorcycle accident. And he died instantly. He says, he keeps mentioning that he died instantly, and that word instantly. He remembers like when the cops came to the door and they said instantly. And then he also looks up the word redemption and figures out what that means. The act of being rescued or freed or saved, payment of an obligation. And then at the end of the chapter, he finds a little note from James Hampton, and it is on the hat. He returns the hat and he gives him a little note. Why did James take the hat, Arius? For the wings. So we don't know why yet, but we know that he took it for the wings. So we're on chapter 8. This is page 32. Arthur wondered if he should tell someone about the note, especially the weird part about the wings in St. James. Had the junk man left it for him? And if so, why had he signed it St. James? He considered bringing the note to his probation officer when he went for his first appointment a few days later. But after meeting her, he was glad he hadn't. So when you're on like probation, which he's on, you have to meet with a probation officer every so often. I think it's like once a week. I think it depends on what you did. But you have to meet with an officer once a week and like check in. So this is his. In juvie, he'd heard that some officers were nice and some were complete jerks. His officer turned out to be a short, box-shaped woman named Wanda Billy, who hadn't seemed to have much patience for anything. Her office was in the basement of the courthouse. Arthur's mother dropped him off while she went to look for free parking, and it took him forever to find the right hallway and the right numbered door. The whole place appeared to have been designed as a human maze. Top of page 33. "You're late," Officer Billy said when he walked into her office 15 minutes past his 2 o'clock appointment time. You don't want to be late to your probation officer appointment. Yeah, you do not want to be late. That's not a good thing. What'd you say, Carter?
The hallways messed him up.
Oh, yeah, yep. So it's not really his fault. He got lost. Arthur glanced at the clock above the officer's head and tried to explain. "I couldn't find..." "Stop." The officer held up her square-fingered hand, so she just goes like, "Stop." Are you late? Are you late or are you not late, Mr. Owens? The elevator wasn't... Stop. She does it again. Already the hand thing was getting old. Arthur wondered if the lady had been a traffic cop in a previous life. "Did I ask you what made you late?" The officer chomped on her gum. "No, ma'am." Arthur shook his head. "Have a seat." Officer Billy gestured to the cracked black plastic chair in front of her desk. Everything in the room appeared to be broken. The wall next to him had a spider web of cracks in it, as if someone had tried and failed to put his fist through it. Oof. So you can see some like signs of like past people being in this room, maybe like punching a wall or something. He sat down gingerly on the broken chair. He kept his hands in his lap. "So," Officer Billy leaned back in her chair, "you're the kid with the anger problems who threw a rock at a black man's head." "Brick," Arthur tried to explain, and it wasn't because... I feel like you wouldn't want to say brick in that situation, like rock might be better. Like brick seems bigger. "Brick," Arthur tried to explain, and it wasn't because... Stop. The officer put her hand up again. "I don't care about the details. All I care about is you, buddy. Right here, right now." She leaned forward and rapped her knuckles on the desk. "How are you going to change your life?" Arthur didn't answer, and he didn't think Officer Billy was expecting an answer. Top of page 34. Because she pushed on without waiting for his reply. "You understand you've been given a second chance, right? I'm in charge of overseeing your second chance." She pointed to her barrel-shaped self. And you better not mess up. None of my kids ever messes up. Got that? Arthur nodded. Putting on a pair of reading glasses, she picked up the single sheet of paper that was sitting in the middle of her desk. Arthur had never seen anybody with such an empty desk. He hoped he wasn't her only project. Now, it seems here you'll be working 4 hours a week for Mr. Hampton until you complete the 120 hours required by the court. The officer stopped reading and glared at Arthur over the top of her glasses. That doesn't mean 118 hours or 119 and a half hours or 119 and 3/4 hours. Got it? I don't care whether you get lost, sick, tired, or your dog dies. You are required to finish 120 hours. No excuses. Arthur managed to resist saying he didn't have a dog. You don't want to mess with her. What sort of work will I be doing? He asked politely. Whatever you're told to do, buddy. He knew he shouldn't keep going with his futile line of conversation, but he did. I'm not sure the judge knows that sometimes. I'm not sure the judge knows that sometimes, he hesitated, the junk man, well, Mr. Hampton, goes through people's garbage looking for stuff, so I wanted to make sure that I'm not... Stop. Officer Billy held up her hand. Who was the one with the problem here? Arthur had to try very hard not to sigh out loud. Me? That's right. Did Mr. Hampton throw the brick? No. Did Mr. Hampton get himself arrested and sent to the detention home? No. The officer jabbed her finger toward Arthur. Then I don't think he's the one we should be worrying about here, do you? No, probably not, Arthur mumbled. He stared at the scratched wooden top of the desk, wondering how many times he had to meet with Officer Billy. He hoped it wasn't very often. As if she'd read his mind, the woman said, once a month. You come here once a month. Next time, be on time, and we'll talk about how your assignment is progressing. Mr. Hampton will record your hours and report to me also. Then I report to the judge. The buck stops with me. That's it. Pretty simple. Got it? Yes, Arthur replied, desperately hoping the meeting was over. Officer Billy held a crisply folded piece of paper toward him. Here's the address where you are to meet Mr. Hampton on Saturday for your first day of work. Be on time, work hard. 4 hours, no excuses, remember? Arthur took the paper and nodded. Yes, ma'am. He stood up and started to ease toward the door. What is that noise? Oh, it must be the pencil sharpener on the other side of the wall.
Yeah.
I thought Arius or Carter were messing with it. I was like,
What if we
ooh.
were attached? We thought we were one spun.
Ooh, that'd be weird. All right, top of 36. Stop, the officer called out behind him. Arthur didn't even need to look to know she had her hand up. He turned around reluctantly. Don't forget, she said, pointing a warning finger at him. Don't mess up. All right, we're going to start the next one. I think we can do it, maybe. Okay, top of 37, this is chapter 9. Arthur kept hearing Officer Billy's words in his head as he walked to James Hampton's house on the first Saturday in December. Don't mess up. A miserable, pebbly white sleet was coming down from the colorless sky. Arthur had told his mom he wanted to walk. It was only a few blocks to the address on the paper. He'd insisted. Plus, he knew they didn't have the money to waste on gas. Arthur wiped his cold and already running nose on his sleeve. Ew. Stupidly, he hadn't thought to wear gloves or bring a hat. He just wanted to get out of the house that morning and get his first 4 hours over with. At least there would only be 116 more to go after that. It's a lot of hours if you think about it.
Why did you do more 6 hours?
It's a lot.
That's not 6 hours a day, isn't that?
No, it's not too bad. He had
Try to get 8. That's
He had no clue what to expect. Would Mr. Hampton have him running errands or cleaning toilets or what? He wasn't even sure who to expect. The crazy junk man with the ragged tan coat, top of 38 now, and fogged eyeglasses, or the polite, soft-spoken man in the brown tweed suit. He pulled Officer Billy's paper out of his pocket and checked the address again. On the back of the same page, Arthur's mother had drawn a pretty lame map of how to get to 7th Street, where he was supposed to go. Arthur shook his head. It wasn't like he needed a map. His school bus drove past these neighborhoods every day, although he'd never actually walked around in them. At the next street, he had to make a left. Arthur squinted at the numbers as he walked. Unlike his street, where the small bungalows and square yards were almost all the same, The houses on 7th Street were old two-story ones, jammed together like mismatched puzzle pieces. Some had porches in front and leaning garages in the back. Others had only a narrow patch of yard with a gravel driveway between them. Scattered along the street were some neighborhood businesses that looked as if they'd been there for years. A gas station on the corner, an auto repair shop with a couple of rusty cars in its side lot, a tattoo shop called Groovy Jim's Tattoos, and a small grocery store. So he lives in a neighborhood where like all the houses kind of look the same. Have you ever seen a neighborhood like that? It's weird. Yeah, my parents in Florida live in a neighborhood like that, and it's literally like all the same. It's very odd. But then he goes on to 7th Street, and it's kind of like the other side of the town. It's like a city. There's like all sorts of different businesses and whatnot areas.
So when I grew up in the city, like the neighborhoods I used to live in, they were like that, and all the houses looked the same.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was younger, I went and like rode my bike to school, and then I rode it back home.
Yeah.
And then my neighbors, I went to the wrong house. I opened the door, and then like the owner of the house was just sitting there at the table, and she just looks at me. And
You're like, oops, wrong house.
Oh, question. Wait, hold on. If areas grew up in the city, you heard of like, were you like one of those kids that like you do it nasty, and you know, slur?
Oh my God. All right, we're going to keep going. We're on the bottom of 38. The only thing missing was the address he was trying to find. So he had a really hard time getting to this address. Arthur walked up and down both sides of the street. There wasn't much traffic for a Saturday morning. A few city buses drove by without stopping. He folded and unfolded the paper in his pocket, checking it over and over again, until the ink was smeared and the sleet had turned the page into a soggy mess. He was freezing and losing time. The closest address to the one on his page was the tattoo shops. He remembered Officer Billy's warning, no excuses. I don't care whether you get lost, sick, tired, or your dog dies. He decided to pull open the door of Groovy Jim's Tattoos. So he's going to go in this tattoo shop to see if he can find James Hampton's place. A blast of warm air hit his face. The weird antiseptic smell of the place made his eyes water. He blinked, trying to see if anybody was around. Hawaiian-sounding ukulele music was playing somewhere. A white and black cat came over and rubbed against his ankles. Can I help you? All Arthur saw at first was a frizzy mop of hair behind the counter. Then the rest of the guy emerged from where he'd been sitting. There was no question this was Groovy Jim. Arthur didn't even have to ask. The guy wore a t-shirt with the words "Ban the Bomb" across the front, green tattoos spiraling up his skinny white arms. Reluctantly, Arthur pulled the scrap of paper out of his pocket, wishing he didn't have to look so stupid in front of a stranger. With the way his eyes were watering, he knew the guy was probably going to think he'd been crying. I'm trying to find this address, he mumbled, holding the page toward Groovy Jim. You know where this is? The guy glanced at the paper briefly and handed it back to him. So how long have you been looking? Arthur stretched the time only a little bit. About an hour or two. Top of 40. That was what it felt like anyhow. The guy laughed. That's all? Arthur couldn't tell if he was joking. When he didn't smile, Groovy Jim gave him an odd look. Okay, he motioned toward a door at the back. Follow me. I'll show you where it is, kiddo. Arthur didn't really like being called kiddo, but he didn't think the guy meant it as an insult. Groovy Jim seemed like the kind of person who probably called everybody kiddo, even the cat. He also didn't appear to be in much of a hurry. He moved through his shop as if he were on a Sunday stroll in the park. None of this was helping Arthur get his 4 hours started any sooner. When they finally reached the back of the shop, it took Groovy Jim another few minutes to unlock and push open the metal door. A gust of cold air rushed in. The place you were trying to find is in the back. See the garage? As he leaned against the heavy door to keep it open, Groovy Jim pointed to a small brick building standing by itself at the end of the gravel alley. That's the place you're looking for. A garage? Arthur balked. He hadn't expected a garage. Had he been given the wrong address? How was a garage somebody's house? Groovy Jim looked at him curiously, maybe wondering what was up. You know Mr. Hampton, right? Kind of, Arthur replied, tugging at the jagged front of his hair uncertainly. He looked at the garage again, making sure it was really a garage. It really was a garage. There were no front doors or windows or anything, were there? Does he live there? He asked. Groovy Jim shook his head. Don't think so. He just comes here to work. I see him a lot in the evenings, carrying things in and out with his grocery cart. I guess he builds or fixes things or something back there. What kinds of things? Groovy Jim shrugged. Don't know, never asked. He waved a tattooed arm at the garage. Go ahead and knock. If he's there, I'm sure he'll answer. He seems like a nice enough guy. But I gotta go back inside. I'm freezing out here, kiddo. Okay, thanks. Arthur forced a smile. Good luck. The door closed behind Groovy Jim with a hard slam. And Arthur was left on his own in a swirl of spitting snow. So he finds the place. It is like a weird brick garage. And he can't believe that that is like where he's supposed to be. So we'll find out what happens next.